For most of history, money had one sacred rule. Governments must never spend more than they earn. It was common sense. It was morality. It was the backbone of responsible leadership. But then came one man who rewrote that morality, quietly, brilliantly, and permanently. He didn't lead an army. He didn't hold office. He didn't shout from podiums or ignite revolutions in the streets. He changed the world with an idea. His name was John Maynard Keynes, and he convinced governments that sometimes breaking their own rules is the only way to save a collapsing world. Welcome to Finlore, where money, power, and history collide, and where the most dangerous ideas are the ones meant to protect us. A world running out of breath. Picture the early 1930s, an entire global system suffocating. Factories weren't slowing down, they were silent. Banks weren't unstable, they were vanishing. And behind every statistic was a family losing everything. For centuries, the economic playbook had been simple. Leave the market alone. It will heal itself. But the invisible hand wasn't healing anything. It was letting the world bleed out. People weren't spending because fear choked them. Businesses weren't hiring because no one was buying. Governments weren't intervening because intervention was considered sin. The entire global machine wasn't malfunctioning, it was frozen. This was the world Keynes walked into, and he saw something everyone else missed. Markets don't die from failure, they die from fear. And fear, unchecked, becomes a feedback loop. The paradox that shattered orthodoxy. Keynes introduced an idea so simple, so obvious, that it was considered madness. Sometimes saving is the problem. He explained it like this: when one household cuts spending, that is caution. When millions of households cut spending at the same time, that is catastrophe. Because one person's spending is another person's paycheck. When spending collapses, income collapses. When income collapses, fear explodes. And when fear explodes, spending dies even further. A spiral, an economic black hole. Keynes called it the paradox of thrift. What protects individuals destroys nations. His solution was equally shocking. If private demand disappears, the government must create demand. Not eventually, not cautiously, immediately. Borrow, spend, build, hire. Inject life back into the system. Not because debt is good, but because collapse is worse. He envisioned the economy like a stalled engine. The private sector normally drives the car, but when it stalls, the government must turn the key, push fuel into the cylinders, and spark the ignition again. Once the engine runs on its own, step back, let the market drive again. It wasn't ideology, it was physics. The reluctant apostle, Roosevelt. Even with Keynes shouting from the sidelines, the world refused to listen. Britain strangled itself with austerity. Germany's deflationary discipline fueled extremism. And in the United States, President Hoover waited for markets to heal and watched the economy drown. By 1933, America was a wounded giant. Then came Franklin D. Roosevelt, not an economist, but a man with instincts that aligned with Keynes's revolution. He didn't call it Keynesianism, he called it action. Massive public works, millions of jobs, construction, art, education, electricity, all funded by the government's willingness to borrow in a time when no one else could spend. And the frozen machine began to move again, slowly, unevenly, but unmistakably. Still, the world didn't fully believe Keynes. Not yet. The experiment no one wanted. The final proof came from the darkest chapter in modern history, World War II. Governments weren't trying to stimulate their economies. They were trying to survive. So they spent and spent and spent. Factories roared back to life. Unemployment vanished. Production surged beyond anything the market had ever achieved. The irony was brutal. War accomplished what peace could not. It validated Keynes's theory on a scale he never wished for. When the war ended, his philosophy became gospel. Governments embraced spending as a tool. Reconstruction accelerated. Demand revived. And the world entered a golden age of growth from 1945 to the early 1970s. Keynes had saved capitalism by teaching governments to manage it, guide it, and stabilize it. But he had also awakened something dangerous: the price of success. Keynes believed in balance. Spend in crises, save in prosperity. The world adopted the first half and conveniently forgot the second. Politicians discovered a truth Keynes feared: stimulus wins elections, austerity does not. Governments kept spending even when economies were booming. Debts grew, expectations inflated, and the global machine began to overheat. Then came the 1970s, a decade that broke the illusion of control. Stagflation, inflation and unemployment rising together, something that should have been impossible under Keynesian logic. Oil shocks shattered confidence. Monetarists like Milton Friedman rose to prominence, arguing that governments had overstepped and that too much money, not too little demand, was the real danger. For a moment, it looked like Keynes had been defeated. But history wasn't done with him. The return, 2008 and beyond. In 2008, the global economy imploded under its own excess. And just like that, Keynes returned. Bailouts, stimulus, quantitative easing. Trillions created out of thin air. This wasn't Keynesianism as he imagined it. This was Keynesianism on steroids. And once again, the system survived. But something had changed. The new money didn't flow to workers, factories, or wages. It flowed into financial markets. Stocks exploded. Housing skyrocketed. Inequality widened into a canyon. Governments had learned how to restart the engine, but not how to control where the fuel flowed. Then came a second resurrection, the pandemic. Lockdowns froze the world, and governments unleashed the most aggressive spending in human history. Stimulus checks, emergency loans, unlimited printing. For a brief moment, the world seemed economically alive even while physically shut down. Until inflation returned, loud, fast, unavoidable. Keynes's medicine had become addictive. Every crisis required more. Every rescue made the next one harder. And the world finally faced the uncomfortable truth: we no longer use Keynesianism as a tool. We use it as a habit. The paradox of Keynes. Keynes wanted governments to think, to act deliberately, to support the economy when fear overwhelms reason. But modern politics turned his insight into a permanent solution, an excuse for endless borrowing. He taught governments how to save capitalism, but also how to postpone consequences. And so, today, we live in a world where recessions are feared, constraints are ignored, and stimulus is the first answer to every question. Keynes warned that in the long run we are all dead, a call for urgency, not irresponsibility. Yet over decades it became a justification for avoiding discipline altogether. That is the great irony of Keynes. He rescued capitalism but made it dependent on rescue.
A system once powered by confidence is now powered by intervention. A world once built on thrift now survives on debt. Keynes didn't destroy the old rulebook. He replaced it with a mirror, one that shows us how fragile economies truly are when belief, fear, and power collide. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.